I'm sorry, I don't speak English. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast that will only be recognised as a treasure after it's rediscovered in 150 years' time. Now, there's a tried and tested formula to launching a franchise. You take a best-selling series of novels, hire some big-name actors, and then spend a couple of $100 million on sets, special effects, and exotic locations. So when Paramount Studios released Sahara, starring Matthew McConaughey back in 2005, they were anticipating a blockbuster. They thought that the film, based on Clive Cussler's popular Dirk Pitt character, would spawn a long-running action-adventure franchise. What they got was one of cinema's biggest box office flops, and a film that is now a byword for Hollywood failure. And talking of good ideas that turn out to be terrible, my guest today is a man you can rely on to disappoint. With me once again is Nick Rehak from French Toast Sunday. How you doing, Nick?
Will, I am fantastic, and I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while since you were last on. I went back through the records, and you last appeared on episode 47, where I inflicted Escape from LA on you.
And I remember watching it and being really disappointed, but then it finally clicking, like I completely just misread the film the whole time, and I've actually gone back to watch it and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh wow! I didn't realise you'd gone back to it. So
Yeah, yeah.
I feel I'm feeling a little warm glow inside that
You should. You
I've kind of
should.
talked you round to that movie.
Yeah, it actually caught me off guard too. I wasn't planning on it, but it was on. It was like a back-to-back kind of thing. It was New York and then LA, and I'm like, well, let me give it one more shot, and then I really, really enjoyed it.
I do suffer from that sometimes. Like I go into a film with my own expectations, and sometimes the first viewing is a bit of a disaster because the film is not what I want it to be. And I know I should be more open-minded, but it is something that I do quite regularly do, and I've often done quite a few turnarounds on movies once I go back a second time and I'm kind of more familiar with what's actually in store for me, and I'm able to judge the movie on its own terms. I mean, have you done U-turns like that on many films?
Not many. I've done kind of purposeful turns as well. There's been some where and it comes down to a pretension kind of thing. I'm not gonna lie. There's been some films where I'm like, I know there's something more to this. Let me just rewatch it, and I know I'm gonna get something good out of it. So there's been a couple films where I've kind of forced myself into liking it and enjoying it, and now I do. Not just from as a lover of film, I should enjoy this film, but as like a genuine like appreciation, kind of like how you listen to a song or a band ironically, and you're like, oh, this is kind of goofy fun, but then you actually start to genuinely like that band or song. It's very the same way.
Okay. Well, we're talking about a film that was meant to spawn a franchise, but obviously it didn't in the end. And that kind of made me think, about films that, perhaps should have spawned sequels and other films. So I kind of wondered if there was a film out there that just existed in its own right that you would actually think, why didn't they make a follow up to that? I'd love to see more adventures of that character. Is there any kind of film out there that fits that bill for you?
It does. It's a film that actually teased a further series of like following these characters' adventures, but it never fell through, and that's Rock and Rolla. It was a 2008 Guy Ritchie film. Gerard Butler, Tom Wilkinson, Idris Elba, Jeremy Piven, a lot of big names that have gone on to do like really great films and are probably the price tag alone would be. I mean, Tom Hardy's in it too. The price tag alone would be hard to get them all back together. But at the end of the film, they tease and they say, hey, these characters will return in the real Rock and Rolla. And it's just a bummer that it didn't pan out that way. It's a film that didn't get I feel like a lot of recognition or love when it came out. To me, it was one of those not underground, but back in the days of Blockbuster over here in the States. I remember walking around one night and seeing this film. I'm like, oh, this looks okay. I'd seen other films from Guy Ritchie before, like Snatch and that kind of thing. And I watched it and I was just blown away. And I really, really dug it. And it actually ended up becoming a gateway for me to get into The Wire, because Idris Elba plays a main character in The Wire, and starting my love for that. So, and it also got me into Tom Hardy too, seeing him in that role as Handsome Bob. And I think the year after that, I'm pretty sure that's when he did Bronson. Yeah, he did Bronson a little bit after that too. So all of a sudden I started paying attention to him. So it was a nice launching pad for me into those different actors' filmographies, if you will. So to see it not continue on and go on it's disappointing.
Well, that's really interesting you mentioned that film, especially in light of what we were just talking about, because I saw Rock and Roller in the cinema and hated it. And
Really?
yeah, I really didn't like it. So, in spirit of what we were just talking about, tell me why you really enjoyed this film, and I will go back and I will give it another watch because I've never seen that film again, and I've just thought, oh, why waste my time?
I think honestly it's a combination of the atmosphere and a little bit of the absurdity of it all. The atmosphere, I mean, you have what is it? Gerard Butler is 1, 2, and you got Mumbles played by Idris Elba. They're all together, kind of back and forth doing their thing. Mark Strong comes in every so often as Archie, kind of this like smarmy, kind of borderline dick to Tom Wilkinson's character, and I don't know, just the camaraderie, just the back and forth between them two. It's one of those films where I'm like, man, I wish I could live in that universe and be a part of this gang or that gang. Then the absurdity of some of the fights that go on when Gerard Butler's kind of hunted down, if you will, by these two Russian gangster mobster types.
Yep.
Tom Hardy's character, I'm a sucker for Tom Hardy. Anything he's in, I'm strongly biased to where I'm going to immediately love it. Toby Kebbell's performance as Johnny Quid, I really, really dug him. I really dug just his performance, really, when he gives the speech about the pack of cigarettes and comparing that to life and everything at the bar. Like, I don't know, maybe it was my adolescent brain, but and not that I'm saying like, oh man, it was so deep, but it was kind of touching in a way. Like, yeah, you know what, he's right. He's making a point. I felt like the music was great. It also did something really fun. There's a scene where they're at a party, and I believe Guy Ritchie has done this since, but they're at a party and they're dancing around and they're talking, and there's like these colorful little subtitles that come popping up, like a little trait that he's since used in, what was it? The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Mm.
He used it there too. So just like little visual tricks and fun stuff there. And I don't want to give away some of the plot in case somebody goes to see it, but there's like little takes and turns that happen, and those are kind of fun to I guess experience. And then as the characters go along their arcs, it's just one of those things where it almost feels like an origins film where you get this group together and now, hey, let's see what they can do next now that we kind of have a full understanding, but then it just doesn't happen.
Well, I don't want to dwell on the career of Guy Ritchie anymore. Let's get this show on the road. So let's get stuck into Sahara. So take it away, Trailer Man.
For explorer Dirk Pitt and his team.
This is the place. The ship should be here.
I have to warn you, it is very dangerous for foreigners.
It was a ghost ship, a cursed ship. The mystery that's buried with a long-forgotten legend carries a threat.
This thing could kill millions.
No one could have imagined.
Safinatu al-Maut.
That sounds poetic. What's it mean?
The ship of death.
Great!
This spring,
The Americans I was telling you about, they will soon find out what we're doing. And now the problem is mine.
I'm sorry, I don't speak English.
You are speaking English now.
I have some bad news about your boat.
Adventurer and naval salvage expert Dirk Pitt goes in search of a ship from the American Civil War that was lost whilst carrying millions in gold. Pitt's hunt takes him to Africa, of all places, where he journeys up the Niger River into Mali, which is in the midst of a civil war. Along the way, Pitt falls in with a World Health Organization doctor who is also trying to get to Mali in order to find the source of a mystery disease which has started killing people from the area. Can Pitt find his missing treasure? Will the good doctor prevent the deaths of thousands of people? And will anyone explain how or why a ship from the American Civil War is in the middle of the Malian desert? Sahara came out in 2005. It stars Matthew McConaughey as adventurer Dirk Pitt. What a name. Penelope Cruz plays the glamorous doctor trying to stop the disease outbreak, and there are supporting roles for Steve Zahn, William H. Macy, and Delroy Lindo. It was directed by Breck Eisner, who also made The Crazies and The Last Witch Hunter. Now, there's a sort of interesting backstory to the production of Sahara. As sort of mentioned at the introduction, it's based on a successful series of novels by Clive Cussler, and the intention of this film was to create an action-adventure franchise. However, Sahara was a notable box office failure, losing, according to some reports, over $100 million, and earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's most notorious flops. The reason for this may be the quality of the film itself, as it was not critically well received, with the Washington Post describing it as mediocrity wrapped inside a banality, toasted in nice fresh cliche. That said, it still has an audience rating of 53% on Rotten Tomatoes and a rating of exactly 6 on IMDb. But yeah, enough of me talking and enough of this background. Nick, what did you make of Sahara?
I didn't care for it. I'm gonna be honest. I borderline thought it was boring, actually. There was one part where I was watching it and I kind of fell asleep, so I had to wake up and rewind it.
You poor man.
Yeah, I had to go back and rewatch it, and yeah, I just was just genuinely disappointed. I expected something a little bit more. I mean, it's this big budget action adventure film in the Sahara, and I just found myself not caring about a lot of things, about the characters, about what they were doing, where they were going. I think what hurt was I just genuinely wasn't interested. So I kind of just went through the motions, and it became a little predictable, and I could figure out like, oh, this is the reason for that, or oh, this is for that. And then we can get to it a little bit later, but then there's like that whole soccer ball scene, and I'm like, really? This is how? But I didn't care for it.
Well, I think I'm a bit warmer on the movie than you. I mean, I'm not going to make any great claims for this being a great movie in any stretch of the imagination. Perhaps worryingly, perhaps my standards have just got so low that actually a film of such middling quality as the Sahara is not more offensive. But I thought that this was. It wasn't awful. Stuff happened in it. There wasn't necessarily strong reasons for that stuff happening, and certainly I recognise the lack of investment that you had in the plot and in the characters. I think that's definitely a problem of this particular movie. But yeah, I've kind of watched it a couple of times now, and I was a little bit warmer on it second time around. I think just because I sort of, was just like, okay, you're not going to find out the answers to any of this stuff. It doesn't really make sense, but there's still stuff to enjoy here.
Yeah, there is.
Work with me, Nick.
There are some things I will say. There's some things to enjoy. Like there's a little bit of creativity. When they're flying, like not flying, but driving like the land yacht through, like there's some really cool scenes. Some of the fight sequences are neat, and how they directed the Confederate battles in the beginning through Virginia and stuff like that's pretty neat as well. There are some really cool looking scenes, but outside of that, when you get to the story, yeah, I don't want to say mindless fun because I hate using that phrase, but you expected something a little more fun and exciting, but I was just missing that fun and excitement. It felt like at times it took itself really seriously, but then let off. And it's almost like the film figured out what it was about halfway through and then played it up. But by then I was already out of it, so I wasn't feeling it.
Well, let's dig into some of the I think the problematic elements in this film, which is the plot essentially. And I talked gave a quick sort of précis of the plot here. I've left quite a few things out because the plot is pretty batty, to say the least, and I don't think that this film does a great job of really meshing the different plot elements together. So you have Matthew McConaughey's character, who is this naval salvage expert, who kind of hears a whisper that this apparently he's spent his whole life looking for this lost American Civil War ship which has got some gold on it. He's spent his whole life trying to track this thing down. He hears a whisper that it might be somewhere in the middle of the Saharan desert. Does that really make any sense? Make your own judgment. And then we have, this is combined with this element of the disease, potential disease outbreak, which could have disastrous impacts. It's all a bit unclear quite what the disease is, how it spreads, how it affects people. And this is kind of meshed together, for me, very ineffectively. And I think that really hurts the movie. I'm kind of guessing you had a similar take.
No, absolutely. And in fact, it really threw me off that they start with this battle from the Confederacy. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, makes sense. They're looking for a Confederate ship. We kind of have to see how it got there to an extent. But then all of a sudden it cuts to now we're just in the middle of a chat with some World Health Organization doctors, and they're trying to figure out this disease. Like, what does this matter? The focus should be on Dirk and the others trying to convince their boss, hey, let's go look for this ship. Let's go do this thing. Let's show us these guys and talk about them. And then they just so happen to come across these doctors who then join them. And that should be their subplot should be maybe 5 minutes of the film. And it's just the conversation of, yeah, we've been here figuring out this mysterious disease. Okay, cool. And then they go off and do something else, but join along. And because they have this expertise, they're able to figure out, oh, hey, this is interesting because it links back to this, and another maybe 2-3 minutes, and then we're good. You cut a good 30 minutes out of the film of nonsense that you don't need.
And it is largely nonsense because we never really find out why is Matthew McConaughey so invested in this Civil War ship. We never find out quite, why he really cares so much about its fate. We never find out why it turns up in the middle of the Saharan desert. You're kind of expecting that to be explained at some point in this film, and it never is.
Yeah, the whole time I'm waiting for him to say, hey, we found this treasure chest, and inside is a journal entry, and Doc Roberts said that they were trying to go south to Florida and they ended up hitting, I don't know, like Brazil or something, and then they thought they were going one way but they went the other and ended up in Senegal or Ghana and ended up in Mali or something. And then even then, exactly like you said, why is he so interested in this? It couldn't be. All it needed was a quick monologue, a quick maybe minute and a half of, when I was a kid, my grandfather always told me the story of this ship, and his grandfather told it to him, and I promised him one day I'd find it, blah, 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 blah. All they needed was that, and then I would have been a little okay with it. Sure, it would have been ham-fisted and cliched, but it's something. It beats seeing a bunch of newspaper clippings about, hey, did you hear about this ship from a long time ago? Look at these two guys growing up. Meanwhile, there's this ship that no one else is talking about but his character. Even when they go to bring it to the Admiral, William H. Macy, he's like, again with the ship. If this was the second or third film in this series, I can see people being like, oh my God, they're finally going to go after this ship. I could see it being teased throughout the films. But if you're just going to start into this and all of a sudden he's on about the ship, who cares? I don't care about the ship. I don't. And then spoilers, when they end up finding the gold later on in the film, they don't do anything with it. It just sits in a cave. You don't, as an explorer or as a whatever you want to be, don't you think that you have some type of duty, some type of oath to say, hey, you know what? We only found this little bit of gold. Let's put it in a museum somewhere and turn the next page in history and show, hey, here's some cool things that happened.
Well, I think possibly some of the reasons for that might be the very messy production of this movie, and if you what apparently Clive Cussler, who is the author of the novel, had a lot of he was meant to have final script approval on the movie that was made, which is very unusual for an author to have. They're allowed to have some input but not to have sort of final script approval. And apparently what happened was there was so much backwards and forwards with Clive Cussler saying, no, I want this stuff to still be in there, and the filmmakers it doesn't make sense, we need to take it out, that actually they just went ahead and shot the movie without his kind of final permission on the script because they just got sort of so exasperated. But I think out of that, that backwards and forwards, there was if you look at the history of this movie, there's an awful lot of writers employed on this movie, and it just feels like this whatever draft of the script this is, it's probably somewhere it's probably the 273rd draft of the script for this movie, because there's elements throughout this film, there's a character, kind of like a sinister sort of Tuareg type character who is, it seems, spying on Penelope Cruz's UN doctor, but his presence is never explained, and you kind of think, okay, maybe we're going to find out later why he's seemed to be spying on her and why he then attacks her. That whole attack on Penelope Cruz is never explained, and you kind of think yeah, you just think, well, who is this character? Why is he there? It's never explained, and that's just one of many examples of kind of I think a sort of a script that just got put through the meat grinder so many times that it just came out in a bit of a sort of chopped up mess.
Yeah, and it's frustrating too that we don't have that kind of payoff, because even if the reason was, oh, we didn't want her to find the reason for the disease was because of the chemicals and compounds found within the ship, because it felt like to me even they were surprised that there was a ship there because they came across it by mistake. Really? That's how you discover it? And this is where we get into spoiler territory, and I hate to kind of jump the gun here, but this is frustrating. They happen to be in a random village kicking a soccer ball around, and it miraculously goes down several flights of stairs into this cave where there's all kind of pictures and drawings. So one would think, okay, they know where it is, but they don't, because it's just in the dirt somewhere that they only come across by chance. Everything in this movie, there's too many things that are by chance, and that bothers me. There's not enough things that are like by design. I can understand if the ship was hiding underneath of the big solar plant that they had going up. To me, that makes sense. But to have it just, oh, it's just in a riverbed somewhere. Really? Your whole this is it for you? Everything else makes sense. Like if you look at the Indiana Jones films, he was trying to get from A to B, and in point B you knew exactly what was going to be there, and that was going to be the Grail or what have you, or the heart or whatever. You were going to find it. You knew where it was, but here it was like, we'll come across it sooner or later. Hey gang, look what we happened to find.
Similarly, this film provoked thoughts about like Raiders of the Lost Ark, and because that's a classic action adventure movie, very much of the style that I guess they thought they were making with Sahara, and it kind of made me think about, okay, why does a film like that work and why does Sahara not work? And because they both essentially have pretty daft plots. Raiders of the Lost Ark is about some chest that holds the power of God inside it, which is a pretty bonkers concept to have. And, it's probably no more daft really than the concept of Sahara, but that film works and this one doesn't. I mean, what makes a film with a daft plot work and one not work?
I think it works for two reasons. The first reason is there is a very easy and understandable jump to go from location to location. With Sahara, it feels like, oh, we just happen to be here. It's a lot of coincidence. Whereas, Raiders of the Lost Ark, in the beginning, he's in this jungle and all of a sudden he gets defeated. So he's back and he's teaching, and all of a sudden he has a conversation. It's like, we really want you to go do this. And he goes off and does this. And then it snowballs into what it becomes. There's also, now that I'm thinking about it, there's also a very clear villain in the beginning when he gets defeated by that guy. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but his like arch nemesis archaeologist or whomever. Belloc. That's good pull. When Belloc is like, hey, I got the statue now, you lose. It even falls into the Uncharted video games, which are very similar to the Indiana Jones thing. You have a very clear, like, hey, I need to get to this before that guy does. And I think Sahara falls apart with that.
Well, there are a lot of very good actors in this film. How do you think they work together?
I think there's a definite camaraderie and rapport between McConaughey and Steve Zahn. And I can't think off the top of my head if they've ever been together in another film before or since.
I think he's Zahn's turned up in quite a few McConaughey things. I'm pretty sure he was in Dallas Buyers Club, and I'm pretty sure he was in something else. So I don't know if they are like mates or what their backstory is, but it just seemed quite interesting that in reconnaissance movies, Zahn keeps cropping up. So perhaps one of the reasons that they have that rapport in this film, which is like, I definitely agree, that's one of the sort of better things about this movie. Perhaps it's actually because they've got that same sort of rapport in real life.
Well, it would be great to see that translate into more films together, more expanded roles together, something, because they just work really, really well together. And I would like, even if Rainn Wilson popped up on occasion and did his thing, and even their back and forth with William H. Macy's character, that works really well too. Like the whole gang, I feel, works really, really well together. Maybe
Penelope
it's just
Cruz,
me. That's what I'm getting at. Maybe it's just me. I feel like they kind of shoehorn her in there. I feel like they're just like, oh, we're focused on these guys, but she's in here too. I wish there was more of her, and I wish that I guess she was more a part of it instead of all of a sudden just, hey, here I am. Oh, you're in the group now. Hey, this is over. Hey, we're on a beach now. Like it didn't feel natural to me, whereas everything else felt very natural.
Well, she doesn't really have a lot to do once she's part of the group, apart from sort of need to be, rescued periodically. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why, she doesn't really work so well as a character. I don't think she's necessarily bad in this movie. I think she just doesn't have anything to do. Whereas Steve Zahn, he's got there's moments within the film where he has to do a thing which fits into the, the bigger picture of the movie. And Penelope Cruz doesn't really have anything to do along those lines.
And it makes you wonder, too, if further along the line in the series with Dirk that Clive Cussler had going, does this character show up again? Is it a one-off Bond girl type situation? Like, if the series were to continue, would she flourish? Would we see more of her? Would there be more of an understanding? I don't know. I didn't know how to perceive her character as the film went on. And I agree completely with what you said. Like, she just didn't have much to work with. She was truly the Princess Peach to this Mario and Luigi duo.
Now, I need to give a little special mention to Delroy Lindo, who is in this particular movie, and he's somebody that Exploding Helicopter saw recently when we reviewed the film Broken Arrow, which features a phenomenal for exploding helicopters. So it was good to see Delroy Lindo in another exploding helicopter movie, and he's starting to rack up some appearances in some pretty heavyweight exploding helicopter movies. But another reason I wanted to bring up Delroy Lindo though was one of the scenes, and this is again sorry for anyone listening to this who hasn't seen Sahara, but I don't think Nick and I can spoil the movie any more than the script writers and the director have, so I'm not really going to apologize too much for this. But one of the end scenes of this movie sees Delroy Lindo, who plays this CIA operative, basically poison one of the villains of the piece, and he deliberately fills his glass with some poison unbeknownst to this guy, and you're left to draw your own conclusion that this guy is going to endure a painful death. And I don't know about you, Nick, I thought that was a super weird note to end this movie on.
That was incredibly weird, to the point where I looked over because my fiance was watching it with me, and she just kind of throws her hands up and was, so what, he's just going to poison him and leave? And that's kind of how we're left. It's not like this big, to-do. It's just wink and a nod, hey, I got him. Okay. Well, what does this solve? What does this do? What are the consequences here? What's really going to happen? And it doesn't feel satisfactory either. It still wants me leaving more. And then again, is this a character that throughout the rest of the series, how often does he pop up? Is he in there at all? Is this a one-off?
Because the only reason Delroy Lindo is involved in this movie is because he's doing a favor for William H. Macy. And so he does him this favor of kind of tracking down where Conaghy and Steve Zahn are in the Malian desert. But you kind of think that favor is not going to extend to just cold-bloodedly murdering somebody. Maybe that was meant to be his character, but the film doesn't set it up that way. It just is just a super weird note to sort of chuck in at the end of this movie. And then we cut to a shot of Penelope Cruz and McConaughey frolicking around on a beach. We just go from sublime to the ridiculous.
Yeah, and then they're, again, frolicking on the beach, completely forgetting the fact that, I don't know, Dr. Frank Hopper was murdered. And, what are you doing with your career now? Everything is just up in the air. And she's like, doesn't matter. I'm on a beach somewhere. Get a little bit real for a second. And that's, again, adds to the whole, is she a Bond girl type? Is she a character that pops up every so often? What was really her role other than token female?
I don't think there is an answer to that question. I think she was a token female. So on that note, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Recall Podcast here at ThatMomentIn.com. I am your host, The Vern, and on each episode, myself, along with a guest, will be talking about an iconic scene from a classic movie. Which films will we be discussing? Well, that's all up to you, because before each episode airs, we're going to be giving you a poll of great flicks to choose from. Whichever one gets the most votes, that's the one we'll be talking about. So, listen to the Cinema Recall podcast on the site thatmomentin.com, or on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Podomatic, or SoundCloud. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy it.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. After discovering the Civil War ship buried in a Saharan sand dune, McConaughey and his chums dive inside to avoid General Kazim, who is trying to kill them from his attack helicopter. McConaughey readies a 150-year-old cannon that's aboard the abandoned ship. He waits for the most opportune moment before firing the cannon. It launches an iron projectile which crashes through the windscreen of the chopper. The metallic sphere appears to fall harmlessly into the rear of the chopper. However, a second glance reveals that there's a fuse slowly burning down. Before Kazim can throw it out of the whirlybird, the bomb explodes, destroying the chopper. Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
I really, really liked this exploding helicopter for two reasons. One, well, actually just one reason. It just felt very realistic to me. It wasn't a explosion over the top, pieces are going everywhere, and it does this weird spiral thing to the ground. It just explodes and then falls straight down vertically. And my question to you is, I can't recall ever seeing that in a film before. Are there other exploding helicopters that just do that and just fall straight down and don't go whirly-birding off to the left or the right or whatever direction?
Yeah, there's a few examples of that. So it tends to happen when you have a helicopter that is just hovering in a particular location, which is what you see here. So give you a very famous film which features a similar sort of fiery chopper fireball that just plunges straight down. So if you check out True Lies, the exploding helicopter there, it explodes in the air, then crashes straight down to the ground and it hits the ground and explodes again. So yeah, it's something that chopper fireball aficionados will have seen before.
Well, it was a pleasant surprise to me, and I really liked that touch. I don't know why, but I just really thought it was cool.
And I really enjoyed seeing a helicopter be destroyed in a completely new and unique way. I don't, certainly no helicopter in any other film that has yet been made or that I've found has been exploded by a cannon. Obviously, they were basically not a kind of not a weapon that was sort of used much. The kind of the overlap of helicopters and cannons didn't really happen. So I guess it was something that I never expected to see in a movie. So I was quite delighted to see that type of old school weapon getting an outing here in this particular movie and getting to down a helicopter.
That threw me off too, because I really thought during the chase that it was just going to be, hey, we fired up a couple shots, a stray hit somebody in a shoulder, it goes down. I kind of thought it was going to be something like that, or maybe out of nowhere somebody fires off a missile, just something very typical. But to see a cannonball go through, that was also really, really cool. I mean, it's no harpoon gun, but a cannonball, I'm for it. I want to see more creative ways. I want to see that.
And they also kind of draw out, I guess, the anticipation of the chopper fireball a little bit in that sequence by having the helicopter doesn't just explode immediately when it's hit by the cannonball. It kind of crashes into the back of the helicopter, sits there for a few seconds as the fuse burns down. So you get that classic despairing, what the, oh no, look from General Kazim before he finally expires in a massive explosion. But yeah, I appreciated the way it just sort of drew out that, the kind of the inevitable exploding helicopter moment.
I mean, even before that, too, when they're trying to get the cannon together, it took a lot to get that cannon together. It was kicking down doors. It was pulling on cords several times, not just one or two times. And to see that consistent failure, and then you're like, oh, okay, finally they're going to get him. And then they don't quite. And you're just, like you said, oh, no, why, how can this be? And then, boom, here comes the payoff. So it was a very enjoyable fireball, despite, to me, a less than enjoyable film.
Okay, well, I think that just about wraps things up. Nick, thanks for joining me once again. Do you want to take a moment to plug French Toast Sunday and anything else you got going on at the moment?
Absolutely. FrenchToastSunday.com is where you can find myself and my other compatriots. You have Lindsay and Jess and Rob and Mark. It's a wonderful group of Baltimore-based film lovers. We do reviews every so often, fun, fancy posts. The podcast episodes, they've been a little sporadic lately. We've just been going through a lot of life changes. Some of us bought houses. Some of us had surgeries. Some of us are getting ready to get married. So it's a lot of... It kind of went on the back burner, but we're planning ahead and looking to 2019 to be a really big and really fun year for us. So definitely check us out, FrenchToastSunday.com, and of course the podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Now I've got a note here which says I need to remind you to rate, review and retweet this podcast. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Where are they? They are looking for the doctor.
I have to put you on hold. I don't believe this is a normal shakedown, huh?
If you do not get out of your engine, you run the risk of being fired upon. The doctors. We are looking for the doctors. Where are they? Where is the woman?
I'm sorry, I don't speak English.
You are speaking English now?
No, I only know how to say I don't speak English in English. Uh-huh. Al? Hi, hold on!
Stop the engine!